Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm here today with our guest Kelsey Vinson, who is the Director of Football Science at Virginia Tech University. Kelsey, thank you for joining us today and lovely to have
Yeah,
you here with us as well.
yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and for anyone listening all around the world, I do apologize in advance if any of my English dialect does not uh, correctly pronounce the places or destinations that Kelsey has been through throughout her career as well. So we've already been laughing and joking in that before the podcast as well. So Kelsey, before we dive into the conversations, again looking more around like the university American football settings and applications of sports science, it'd be great just to get a bit of an understanding of your background and how you got to where you are in sports science now, and away you go.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a very small town in South Carolina. The closest, like, biggest universities to there were University of South Carolina or Clemson. Grew up a Clemson fan, so I went there. Um, at Clemson, that's where I actually did my undergrad and my master's. So my undergrad degree is just general health science with a focus actually in pre-physical therapy, but decided I did not want to be a physical therapist. That was not the route for me. And then I got my master's there in applied health research and evaluations, um, with a little focus in athletic leadership as well. While at Clemson, I actually had never even heard of sports science. If you had asked me as a freshman, I would not have been able to tell you what that was. Going into my senior year, however, starting that summer, I began interning with their football program, um, under the direction of Alex Bina, who is their director of sports science. And I started as just like a little recovery intern. So I was giving massages with massage guns, helping people with like massage chairs, infrared light beds, cryotherapy, all of that stuff. But then slowly started diving in a little bit deeper into helping with force plates and jump testing, catapulting the conditioning sessions that were happening that summer. And after a couple weeks, I was like, actually, I can see myself doing this. I really like it. Um, and from there, just kind of dove all the way in. After Clemson, I did an internship at the University of Virginia, with their football program, where again, I was just kind of running catapult. And at Clemson we had just won two national championships, so we had all of these resources. And not to say that Virginia did not have these resources, but it was just very different. And there I learned how to be very creative in order to get insights across. You don't really need all this fancy equipment to collect data on these athletes or to be a good like sports scientist and to make performance insights. After Virginia, I went to Auburn University in Alabama, where I was not working with football, but I was working with all of the Olympic sports. So I had swimming and diving, baseball, track, women's gymnastics, all of those sports, which was very, very new to me. Loved it. But I think I had over like 450 student athletes, which is kind of crazy, but it was fun. Enjoyed it while I was there. After Auburn, I feel like I've been bouncing all around. After Auburn, I actually took a break from like in person college athletics, and I worked for a startup data company called Bear Cognition in Charleston, South Carolina. Um, the nitty like athletics can be pretty like gruesome in the hours that you're working. So I just kind of wanted to take a little break, reassess, like, is this something that I actually want to do? So Bear Cognition provide the perfect escape in a way from that, um, where then I had more of that traditional desk job, and I was still in a sports science role, but instead of like being in person collecting and then analyzing that data for a team, I would almost be like a consultant of sorts for other teams. So, for example, Syracuse men's basketball was one of our teams. They were using GPS. The strength coach, athletic trainer, they were collecting all of the data. And then from there, I was helping them make sense of it. Let me help you make a visual that makes sense to your coaching staff and for you. What is this data actually telling you? So that was super fun, but I really, really missed being in person, having those like relationships with the coaching staff, with the athletes, which ultimately help make you a better sports scientist and makes your job a little bit easier. Um, the opportunity at Virginia Tech opened up, and I've been here a little over a year and a half now. Just started my second season as a Hokie. I love being here, love working with Coach Pry and all of our performance staff here. Um, yeah, and it's been great.
Thank you. It sounds like a really interesting, like fascinating journey you've been on. Like, out of curiosity, before we dive into like some of the other content, like, how was it trying to apply your sports science principles across 450 athletes? By the way, like, why did you kind of focus your time and energy into really supporting those guys?
Yeah, so at Auburn specifically, in order to be able to work with so many athletes at once, I was like, okay, what is going to be the best like bang for my buck for this many people? Obviously, I'm not going to be able to GPS this many people. I'm not going to be able to be in every single like weight room session. So what ultimately like ended up working the best for me was force plate testing. So knowing like every Monday I am force plate testing the volleyball and baseball team. Every Tuesday I'm force plate testing um, men's and women's basketball and swim and dive. Like setting up that schedule with just the force plates gave me a really good look at week over week, what were these changes? If we needed to maybe retest again on another day, super easy to at that point, but just give me a really good glance at the fitness and fatigue for these different teams. Um, that could very like easily be assessed, very quickly assessed as well.
Did you find that working across the different sports as well, you started to investigate more? I suppose like we always talk about running your needs analysis and just diving into what does that sport and those athletes need, and did that kind of influence kind of your force platform testing as well with those guys?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, if you're looking at a women's gymnast, their needs and power output and even like personalities are completely different than that for a baseball team, for example. Um, so I had to get a little creative in how even I would approach these different teams, but even how I was analyzing their data. So, a jump height for baseball that might be have proven um, that might have had some sort of like correlation to their actual performance. But with gymnastics, maybe that actually didn't mean anything. So maybe I needed to look more into their movement strategy. Maybe that is more telling to me than like the simple outputs. So definitely each team had their own needs. I even think that like if you're looking at football, a wide receiver, they need to be a little bit more explosive and bouncy on their feet than some other positions who might just need to be like producing more power, might be. So I had to apply those same things that I had learned from Clemson and UVA more so between position groups and apply that same thinking across multiple sports. Also, with multiple sports, just even how you report to those coaches had to be completely different. Or, I was kind of unsuccessful, not really doing my job that well. Like, what works for one coach who might be more data oriented, he might completely understand it. But another coach might not even, I don't want to say might not even care, but they might need it more simple.
Yeah, no, it's true. Again, like within even like when you work in the same sport, like I remember one of my jobs, we had 8 coaches in 6 seasons. So the same sport, the same team, the same players would have to get different reports based on just different coaches' opinions and what would work for them to get the
Right.
message across as well. And I suppose like you talk a lot about baseball in there, which might actually explain a lot about the paper you selected as kind of like what you wanted to discuss. And I suppose just for like the listeners as well, like before each podcast, we we speak to each other and we say, okay, what research paper would be of interest to you? And Kelsey has actually chosen one that's looking into lower extremity biomechanics and baseball form. So, um, yeah, do you want to give an overview of like why you've selected this research paper by Tesk and colleagues as well, if that's okay?
Yeah, so I picked this one paper because this was kind of the first paper for me that seemed to tie it all together. So, as a sports scientist and as a lot of people do in more of these like sports performance type roles, we're constantly reading research. We're trying to figure out what are other people doing to enhance their performance. And this paper in particular, as I was reading it, and I know that this sounds crazy, this was the first time that it seemed to really click for me that, some of this data that I'm collecting, not only does it apply to the weight room and their strength and their power, it can also apply to what they're actually doing out there playing their game. So this now, while it's very easy for me to explain maybe force play outputs to a strength coach, to a dietitian, to a athletic trainer, sometimes that doesn't always make the most sense to a coach. This paper made it kind of gave me the inspiration in how to explain things to a coach as well. So in the paper, they're talking about different force play outputs. So I think specifically a counter force play outputs from a counter movement jump. So this is using a Sparta force plate, which kind of looks at things in like load, explode, and drive is how they really categorize those movements that happen from the jump. Um, and they would have their players jump on the force plate and then they would go pitch. Well, they were using this force plate as a form of like readiness. If you see that explode score go up, they were also seeing their pitchers' fastball velocity also increase. So, how do you explain that, to a coach, hey, this explode score is going down. We really need to fix this and train this. They might be like, oh, okay, like whatever. If I explain it to them, their explode score is going down, which in turn has a direct correlation with their fastball velocity, fast pitch velocity, they might be a little bit more inclined to listen. So from here, this just then kind of inspired all kinds of different things. Can I look at this load, explode, and drive score and correlate it to rebounds in basketball? Can I correlate it with completed passes in football? All kinds of different things just to see what this relationship between like a sports science test or a weight room metric, how like what that score is and how does it relate to on-field performance, which is ultimately what actually matters the most to these athletes.
Do you think that, and before we go on to like more of like the role that you're doing now, like, do you think that's like a major limiting factor is like sports scientists' ability to communicate with coaches? Because we do get a
Mm-hmm.
lot of complex information, as you say, from different systems. And yeah, like, do you think that's really one of the stumbling blocks when communicating with coaches and players about how to use this and apply it?
Yeah, for sure. So, as a sports scientist, you're getting very complex data sets coming in from multiple different places. So it is kind of this art in a way of like, how do you make something super complex makes sense to somebody at any level. Right now, my head coach, he is actually super into data. So I almost have to make sure that I am giving him enough information, not too little, to almost where, like, I don't want to insult him in a way by dumbing it down too much, but also to where it still makes sense and it's giving him actual insights, actionable data. If I just give him a bar chart, he's going to be like, so what? Like, what does this actually mean? What am I supposed to do? But if I can color coordinate it red, green, yellow, that gives him better insight. It tells the story a little bit more, gives him a little bit more direction and like what to do next.
Which
But another coach, that might not work for them at all. So it definitely is finding that balance. How do you make it all make sense? How do you put numbers into like words essentially? How do you get numbers to tell a story?
which that's a nice little segue on to actually talk about your current role now, if that's okay. So yeah. So how does kind of like your role as director of football science look at the minute? Just for those listeners who are keen to learn a little bit more about American football, stroke college, university level football over in the States as well.
Yeah, so here at Virginia Tech, I am kind of in charge of all um, like athlete performance data collection. So one of the main things is GPS. So we use Catapult. We have 80 catapults on our guys. So our team roster is actually 120. So we have about two-thirds of them in a catapult. My rule is anytime your feet are on the grass, you have your catapult on. So that's pretty much every single day that we're doing that. We also have force plates. Right now, we are using the Bald force plate software. With that, typically we're testing about once a week, usually on the same exact day. Again, just to sort of look at that like fitness and fatigue type levels. We have Nordboard also through Bald, and that is going to be hamstrings only. So I think kind of across the board in collegiate football right now, a lot of people are struggling with hamstring health in general and hamstring tears. You know, how do you prevent them from happening? So that's just another good like safeguard method that we use. We also have recently implemented velocity based training in the weight room. We have perch right now that we're using, and we're just looking at all of our barbell movements. How fast are we moving the bar? How much power are we eliciting when we do that? We have wellness surveys that we're doing once or twice a week, just a general check in on our guys. Where are you sore? How sore are you? How well rested do you feel? And what recovery did you do the day before? To just try to help them see, like, oh, when I don't take care of my body, I actually feel worse versus, if I do the cold tub for 30 minutes, I am less sore. When I go to the athletic training room, I do feel better. Just different things like that. So there's data coming in from all over. We're constantly collecting data on the guys. I feel like I'm with them every single day of the year, having some sort of touch base with all 120 of them. So it's definitely fun. We're staying busy over here.
There you go. And you say 120 is normally a lot, but compared to the 450 that you mentioned earlier, this must be a breeze having only 120 as well.
Yeah, it's super nice. I really like being with just one team. I get to know all of the players' personalities a lot more. I'm a lot closer with like all of the coaching staff. It definitely makes the like relationships a lot more personable, which in turn makes my job easier. So something that I like to say a lot is, especially the athletes, they don't they don't really care how much I know until they know how much I care.
Yeah.
So, being at practice every single day, being at every weight room session, sitting down and eating lunch with them, getting to know them a little bit better. When I do finally stand up in front of them and say, hey, you have not hit 80% of your max speed in a couple days, I need you to sprint after practice. They are much more inclined to listen to me and understand like where I'm coming from. That door is already open for me to start those like educational kind of conversations with them. So, because they know that I have their best intentions at heart. Like, I would never do anything to like hurt them. Whereas at Auburn, where there were a lot more athletes, I didn't even know every athlete's name, unfortunately. Um,
Yeah.
so it's just a lot harder if I don't even know your name to then give you an insight and have you like listen to me. So I really appreciate at Virginia Tech having like this one-on-one relationships that I have with everybody.
Yeah. Again, for the listeners, I had the fortunate kind of experience of getting to come visit you earlier this year as well. And I saw that in action as well. Like, whenever you try new technologies or implement things as well, it was nice to see. I think it was a wide receiver or something you had put
Mm-hmm.
like the system on just to really like get and understand. So it was nice just to see how your personal relationship just so quickly impacted that. So it's great to see. It was interesting as well. You mentioned about when the guys don't necessarily look after themselves, which we always think professional athletes are all, but these guys are students and they
Mhm.
still need to be able to live the university lifestyle as well and have those life experiences. So, is that necessarily a challenge or something you have to incorporate within your monitoring solutions, so to say, and wellness kind of impact as well?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. So all of our guys are 18 through maybe 23 years old. So even like the 18 through the 22, 23-year olds, they act completely different from each other just from like a maturity standpoint. And, they want that college experience. That's not something that we really want to take away from them. But a lot of like education, are you, um, like, I don't know, if you want to go to a party on a Thursday night, but you have a game on Saturday, this is what this does to your body. If you want to stay up super late, this is what this is going to do to you. If you're not eating appropriately when you go to the on-campus dining hall, here are some like effects that this is going to have on your performance. So a lot of education ties into that. One more piece of like monitoring tech that I did not mention earlier. So we actually do have some Whoop bands. I have about 30 of them, I think, on the guys. And that is a great kind of like external monitoring device that we have. So I can control a lot of what our guys do in this building. Our entire performance staff works super well to just kind of keep tabs on what they do when we're in these four walls. But the second they leave, we have no idea what they do, which
Because
is fine. But, we always like to say if you want to elevate your health, elevate your performance a little bit more, this is a great way to keep tabs on it because you can directly see on the app like your recovery score go down if you're not taking care of your body. Um, Really, just kind of enforcing some of those habits that they can control and letting them take ownership over their own health, which is super nice. And you can see those that really like invest in it, how much they've grown in just a couple months of monitoring their own habits.
it's good. Again, it's sports scientists and practitioners are always balancing that dose
Hmm.
response relationship. And so it's nice to hear that actually let's educate the athletes to understand this is what you're giving your body, whether that be nutrition, sleep, exercise, and here's the
Yep.
response to that as well. So it's really cool to hear that as well. Have you had like any changed change kind of attributes or change kind of actions because of what the athletes have seen? So, for example, you have multiple athletes that go, you know what, I'm coming in as an 18-year-old. I don't know what I'm doing. And then by the time they graduate, or even a year later, I need to look after my body better. Yes, I've got the party side I need to be
Hmm.
wary of and do that for social. But no, I'm looking after myself better in this field. Do you feel like does that impact on the program as well?
Um, Definitely. So like I said, I'm going into my second season here. Um, so I started like around mid-April of last year, and then we had all of these new freshmen come in early May. So, we kind of I feel like I started at the same time as all of them. So just thinking about like that one group. So, they all come in as shy little freshmen. They're not entirely sure of like what's going on. So, just kind of seeing them coming from being like super sore, not knowing what to do, asking what should be on their plates, how many hours of sleep should they be getting, to now a little over a year later almost becoming like leaders for this next group, coming in early to take care of their body, getting massages, stretching, taking full advantage of all of the recovery modalities that we have. um, like that's so much rewarding to see for me because I'm like, something is working. They know what they're doing. Now, are they perfect? Absolutely not. But just seeing how much of that change has happened over the course of just one season is really cool to see.
That's awesome to hear as well. And I suppose like hearing about that now and like what the current program looks like, where do you feel like the next kind of innovations will be within your working environment as well?
So for me personally, the next sort of innovations will probably come more in at Virginia Tech anyway, will probably come more in the recovery side of the space. So while that's not really like data collection, there's so much research out there on the benefits of cryotherapy, infrared light therapy, even like massage, all of those types of things. So one of my efforts now is to try to bring all of that in house, just to give our athletes that cutting edge, make them 1% better every day. Um, you know, not make them have to go find that on their own, but actually put it here. Um, so not necessarily like sports science related, but more of like a personal goal. As far as like technology goes, we here we've looked into some like chipped footballs. So how do you get like smarter devices? Player Maker looking into more of how can we track more of those specialists who are not typically like running a whole lot during practice. Theirs is more coming from their load is more coming from kicks and steps, different things like that. Um, so those are definitely some more of our next steps, bigger projects that we have hopefully in the works. And yeah, we'll just kind of see where we go from there.
Next, I suppose if I go back and pick up on what you were saying as well, like obviously recovery is a facet of sports science. I suppose sometimes it goes under the radar because it's not necessarily, you, as you say, you don't need data to necessarily collect recovery, but things like Whoop are now making that
Mm-hmm.
possible to look at recovery. There's obviously other valid and uh, reliable methods like the Aura rings and so on. But really, like, what kind of like different aspects of sports science do you feel are really going to have an impact on American football? We talked a lot about performance monitoring. Now we've mentioned recovery. Do you feel like recovery is overlapping with performance monitoring and overlapping with nutrition, for example, and psychology and all the different facets of sports science? Really?
Yeah, so I almost view sports science as a little bit of a bridge in a way between those different performance departments. So, like, typically you have your psych department, you have athletic training, you have strength, you have nutrition, and they're all separate. And while they could work very well together, sports science can serve as a bridge to almost connect all of those different departments and also connect them to the coaching staff as well. So, nutrition, you might be saying, this athlete is gaining weight. Well, do we know if it's good or bad? Well, now we can look at the strength coach, get some, they actually just maxed out in their squat. And with catapult data, they're running faster than they've ever ran in their entire life. This weight gain is possibly like a good weight gain. Um, so almost just bridging that gap, making everything communicated a little bit better. But as far as, you know, what all falls into the sports science realm under my umbrella, I think it's almost different every single place that you go. So, something that I've actually talked about with a colleague pretty recently is, what is the standard of sports scientists at these different universities? So, everywhere you're kind of looking, everybody's doing it a little bit different, which I think is really cool. It's still so new over here that that standard hasn't really been set yet, which is fun because you go somewhere and you can make it your own. I'm pulling stuff from the past 3, even 4 places that I've been and really kind of making my own vision here at Virginia Tech. But let's say I'm not here anymore, somebody new could come in and make it completely different because they have a completely different vision than what I have. You're going to see at some universities they have multiple people on staff who might have different like focus areas. So you might have one that's only focusing on like rehab data. You might have one that's only GPS and like load management and load monitoring. You might have somebody else that's the force plate like go to. Whereas here, I feel like I'm a little bit more of a generalist. I can definitely do a lot of these different things, but because I'm only one, can't really like dive too deep on it. Or I guess I could, but then I would be almost like neglecting these other areas. So I'm trying to be like a little even in it all, be the master communicator, make it all make sense.
That's that's really cool to hear. And before I go on to the last question, what I suppose like for the listeners that don't really know much about like the American football type program as well, as you say, it does vary. But what does the staffing stroke coaching structure look like? So you mentioned you've got your strength conditioning and sports sciences, whereas like in some place in Europe, that's the same person as well, as you
Yeah.
said. So what does like kind of the back backroom office staff look like at Virginia Tech at the minute for you guys?
Yeah, so obviously, like you're going to have your coaching staff. With football, that's typically, you have your head coach, you have some offense, defensive coordinators, then you have all of your positional coaches, then you have some analysts, and then it just keeps going down and down from there. Um, on the more performance side, support staff area, so normally you're going to have 5 full-time strength and conditioning coaches, and sometimes that's going to be split up where they have a different like specialty. So I've been at some places where one of the guys is strictly just like speed and conditioning coach. So they're going to write like all of that programming, and somebody else might be just like freshman development. So even that has a little bit of wiggle room everywhere you're going to go into like what you're actually going to see. Most power like 4 football programs are going to have a team dietitian. So that is going to be somebody that's over, meal planning, hydration, all of that kind of fun stuff. You're going to have athletic trainers. I'd say typically you're going to have anywhere from 4 to maybe even 8, maybe even more. Lots and lots of student help there for the trainers. Um, I think it's pretty common to see some sports psychologists. Maybe they're separate from just like the football program, but at least the school is going to offer that resource. And then now you're starting to see programs with sports scientists. So I would say when I first had my like first internship, which is now like 7 years ago or however long, that was still very new here. I think if I had Googled like director of sports science at different universities, probably not that many would have popped up. Probably just the programs like Clemson, maybe Ohio State, Alabama, those schools that were kind of dominating, I would say, college football at that time. But now it's sort of starting to become a little bit commonplace. But every school is going to do that a little bit differently. So right now, I am considered a part of like the football staff. So I am underneath like my head coach, who is Coach Pry. Whereas, maybe at another school, they are their own. While in my own department here, I'm still kind of underneath just football and with Coach Pry. Um, at another school, the sports science department might be something that is completely different and not really associated with being part of that football staff, even though they work for that football team. So it sounds a little confusing, but I always like to think of it like if my head coach like got fired or if he left to take another role, like I feel like I would be in a position to where I would go with him, but also potentially have the possibility to stay. Um, Whereas, maybe in another department, like our psych department here, they don't really move based off of who the coaching staff is. While I'm sure that could be an opportunity for them, they're kind of like on their own and service football. That might sound a little confusing, so I hope that made sense.
No, all makes sense. Thank you very much. It's nice, clear. And I suppose on that front as well, like if you were to have a blank canvas, then focusing back on the more sports science support, what would kind of like your structure be now for American football? No budget, no nothing, blank canvas. What would you like to see in your program that would allow you to provide the sports science support that you wanted?
Yeah, so if I had all the money in the world, my dream, so I would. actually love if there was more of a like quote unquote lab like on the facility, um, probably connected to the weight room that has, all of our force plates there, all of our testing technology right there. But then it also includes all of the recovery modalities. So you're going to have infrared beds, nap pods, cryo, everything that you can think of related to recovery in there. And then also possibly having that connected to the athletic training room. So it's all connected together. What you do in the weight room, what you do in the sports science lab, what you do in that training room. Then with that, having a full monitoring system for like everything that could happen on and off the field. So I mentioned earlier trying to monitor kicks a little bit more for like our specialists, just having like a better grasp on what all of the positions need and how can we manage all of their loads. Um, Having almost everything be efficient in a way. Right now, some stuff that I'm working on is just trying to streamline all of our data. How can we download it all, it goes onto a cloud. What can I do to very quickly generate an actionable report? So in a dream world, that is already done, it's ready to go, and it makes sense to everybody. Um, I think that requires multiple people on staff, possibly with different specialties or at least different areas that they're looking at. Maybe one person looks at healthy athletes and one is looking at those with injuries. Um, Maybe one is all like injury prevention, while another one is all maximizing performance. I don't really know what that answer is, but Dream World, we kind of have this lab, lots of people running around just to make it all happen and run smoothly.
No, that's really cool, and thank you. It's fascinating. Like again, when you for the listeners, when you look across different sports, it's so fascinating to see like kind of like so what you described there as well, like in Premier League soccer or association football for the other
Mhm.
listeners as well. Like we have like already in like the Premier League, you have like rehab specialists or return to play
Yeah.
specialists. You have like the goalkeeper specific strength conditioning coach and sports scientists equipped in. So everything that you're saying there is like it seems to be like the evolution that we are going now to more unit based support rather than being a global support. How can we be more specific to the individual? Would that be a fair kind of reflection or
Yeah,
something?
for sure. Like how I said earlier, I feel like I'm more of a generalist kind of role right now, um, which is like neither right, wrong, indifferent in how that really is. But I can kind of see, 10 years from now, these types of positions become a little bit more specific, especially in college football.
No, that's brilliant. And Kelsey, I just want to thank you for your time as well. Like we come to the end of the questions as well. So it's been great to speak to you. And again, thank you for all the time and effort. Is there any closing comments you want to make about any questions you have?
No closing comments, no questions. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was
No,
great.
no worries. Thank you, Kelsey, and thank you to the listeners. And we'll see you next time.